Hey everyone, you're listening to the Reno Fly Shop podcast. I'm Jim Litchfield, owner and guide at the Reno Fly Shop. This podcast is put together to keep you up to date with many of the things that influence fly fishing in our area. During each episode, I will be sitting down face to face with guides, industry reps, and the characters that impact fly fishing. I want you to find out firsthand what is really happening, what is changing, and how best to fly fish some of our local waters. Following that discussion, I will give you a brief fishing report, highlight some of the new gear we have in the Reno Fly Shop, and some of the upcoming events that you can get involved in. You can always go to renoflyshop.com to find out more information along with show notes, pictures, and more details that we discuss. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram to find out what is going on day to day and when a new podcast is dropped. Welcome to episode 9 of the Reno Fly Shop podcast. I'm sitting down today with Matt Koles from Gilligan's Guide Service, and he is going to cover both Pyramid Lake as well as the Truckee River, some of the things that allows him to put his clients and himself on huge fish at both of those fisheries, and some of the ins and outs. So Matt, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Tell us a little bit about yourself as we get into this. I know so many of us know you from your blog at gilligansguideservice.com, your fishing reports, and your social media, but kind of pull back the curtain and let us know a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I grew up in Roseville. That's where I went to high school, and my dad fly fished. So I learned pretty young, I did it all when I was a kid, it didn't matter. Any kind of fishing I was into, spin fishing, bait fishing, fly fishing, I did it all. I just like to catch fish. And my brother fly fished too. So we would come up to the Truckee River, we were only an hour and so 15, 20 minutes away from the Truckee River. So we spent a lot of time on the Truckee River when I was younger. And then we spent a lot of time on the East Carson River. This was before all the catch and release stuff,
sure.
And everything. And all the stuff below Hangman's Bridge, it was before it was catch and release. And we spent a lot of time all summer, we're fishing. And then so when I was 18, I moved to Truckee, because I wanted to fish and I wanted to ski and snowboard, And, I kind of when I got the nickname Gilligan was around that time, and I must have looked like Gilligan or something, which is cool.
Yeah.
And so it kind of stuck,
Yeah.
And when I went with the guide service, I was like, man, you got to call Gilligan's Guide Service. Everybody knows you as Gilligan. And I was like, yeah, okay, let's do it.
Perfect fit.
And people remember it. I've been guiding the Truckee River for, this January will be 13 years,
Wow. So you're known as Gilligan's Guide Service, but you're probably equally as known as living right down in Hirshdale, right next to the banks of the Truckee River.
Yeah. We got fortunate. We were, able to buy a house on the river and I don't know how that worked out, but all things came together and we're very fortunate to be able to live there on the river and it's in my backyard, so yeah. I spend a lot of time obviously on the river. I can have my cup of coffee in the morning and see what the flows are like and what's happening.
Your clients must meet you almost right at the house.
We can meet. It's so convenient. I can drive up half a mile, meet people, and we can start our day. A lot of times I start the day right in basically in front of the house right there.
Boy, that's not a bad commute in the morning.
No, and some of my biggest fish have been caught within 1,000 yards of my house.
That's phenomenal.
So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. How was this summer for you?
This summer was not very good. The drought definitely affected my business. We had some water on the LT. The flows were pretty decent on the Little Truckee actually most of the summer, but people's perception of what the fishing was like, people didn't want to come up here, and come fly fishing in the Truckee area, because of the drought. It's kind of like when we have no snow, people don't want to come up and ski, even though there is some snow. They make snow. All the resorts around here make snow, but nobody wants to come up. So, but when it snows 3 feet, everybody wants to come up. So it's kind of the same, I think, with the water situation that we experienced this year. We had some places to fish, and especially if you got off the grid and you wanted to fish some of the lakes, if you wanted to carp fish down in Nevada here, but it was just a hard sell. People want to fish the Truckee River mainly with me. I'd say 90% of the people that call me up or email me want to fish the Truckee River with me. And Little Truckee maybe second, and then so on down the line,
How, it's interesting that you bring that up, Matt, with that perception, because I felt it here in the shop all summer long. People just really got out of the rhythm. And while the fishing wasn't like it has been typically, it was still pretty decent if you got out to explore, and there was still, we're really lucky.
Yeah, it was, there's definitely there's a lot of water in the Tahoe area, and there's a lot of lakes, there's a lot of high alpine lakes. There's some pretty good creeks, there's actually, some tailwater creeks. There's a lot of stuff out there,
Well, here we are going into the winter months. We're looking at what's predicted to be a great El Nino. What's your approach to keep busy through the winter months as a guide on the Truckee River? How do you approach things differently as opposed to summertime?
We're coming into this winter a little different. We've just experienced, 2 bad years of drought. This summer is really tough on the river in Nevada. We have to kind of see what, we're kind of experiencing a different Truckee River in Nevada now, and we're going to have to see how that pans out, Endow just shocked the river in Nevada, and on all their transects where they did shock trout. They didn't shock a lot of small trout, but they did shock big trout in every place they stopped, and all the fish were over 18 inches. Now,
yeah, I ran into Travis Hawks. To tease the podcast a little bit, we're going to meet with Travis in the month of December as soon as he crunches his data.
Okay.
And Travis and Kim are going to talk about these transects that Matt's talking about right now, and they found trout throughout the river, both downstream within the city of Reno, and then upstream in Nevada as well, upstream in Verdi. So
yeah, and I think the Verdi stretch, the Verdi stretch has never even really suffered from the drought. They've always had water up there by the border, and the first 3 miles there is the trophy trout section of Nevada. They've had water in there all summer long for the last 4 years. So the fishing opportunity is going to be a little different, how it fishes and how we approach fishing it. Last winter it was a little tougher than the winters before, catching wise. So this winter I'm sure is going to be different too. We'll just have to see how it pans out.
When you take clients out, in the winter time on the Truckee, is your approach pretty much the same? Is there a tactic or a technique that you use predominantly in the wintertime differently than in the spring or summer?
Well, that's a good question. Trout in the winter are going to move out of the faster water and they're going to move into slower water, and metabolism changes. So their metabolism is going to slow down in the colder water. So trout, what you're looking for is water usually that is running or moving at a slow walking pace. So if you look at the foam and it's moving at a slow walking pace, those are probably the areas that you want to target. So you're going to want to target runs and pools, and water that's about 3 to 5 feet deep is perfect. Now in the summer, you're going to find trout anywhere, they can be holding in just about any kind of scenario, especially on the Truckee River. There's so much holding water, right? You could go anywhere. And,
yeah, it's a great river for that.
But in the winter, they're going to condense and they're going to move into slower areas of the river because their metabolism is slower. Now, because if you're a big fish, you need to have calories. So they have to eat every day, and sometimes those big fish will put themselves in a feeding lane all day long. Little fish don't need to necessarily feed like a big fish does. So they probably aren't even feeding every day, So that's why when you come out in the winter, you might catch 2 or 3 fish, but they're big. You're like, well, where are the little fish at? Well, they're just not feeding it actively like the big trout are.
So again, techniques, is it a nymphing game? Are you high sticking for these larger trout?
A little bit of everything.
Is it?
I would say we'll catch them in any way, a tight line nymphing, indicator fishing, and streamer fishing, if you're streamer fishing, you usually want to slow down your retrieves because they don't chase as fast, A more passive type of streamer fishing usually works good, like a classic
swinging.
Yeah, like swinging. That's why switch rods work well in the wintertime. A switch rod with some kind of spade type of line, a Skagit or whatever, Scandi, and some kind of tip is good in the winter because it puts a good swing on those flies, just like a steelhead swing,
Absolutely.
In a streamer. Now in the summer, it's kind of opposite, right? You don't want to fish your streamers passively. You want to put a lot of action into them and get that fish to grab. You want a reaction out of the trout.
The streamer fishing, do you try to target fish in that 3 to 5 foot range? So you're using a sink tip, a Versaleader if you're using a single hand rod to get the fly delivered down deep.
Yes.
And to the fish.
Yeah.
They're not going to move very far for these.
Well, sometimes they will, depends what kind of mood they're in, I guess. What the water temperature is, what the weather is doing.
What are some of the flies? What are some of the streamers that you like?
For me, my best type of streamers are something a little smaller. There's this big articulation phase right now, and these 5, 6, to 7 inch flies. I like a fly that's usually about 2.5 to 3 inches long. Some kind of like a cone head, almost like a slump buster something with some bunny strip on it, some kind of picked out dubbing or something. Black works well in the winter. Black, olive, white.
A lot of contrast.
White is very good down on the Nevada side here. There's not a lot of sculpins, especially as you go east of town. But there's a lot of small forage fish and bait fish. And so white works really well, especially as you get into, late January and February, and the browns move up against the riprap and the rock walls. They're chasing bait fish, So,
that's perfect.
Yeah.
Something classic like a woolly bugger.
It's going to work. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And going back to the big articulation thing, it's such a big movement in fly fishing now. It's kind of where, what's happening in fly time, right? All the innovation and stuff is coming out of these big flies. Well, you might go out and fish this big fly all day, and you may move a fish or two. But if you maybe downsize, not only are you going to move the fish, but that big fish is probably going to eat it too, and you're going to move all kinds of other fish, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you can go either route, but I rarely will fish a 5 or 7 inch fly. It's mostly something a little smaller that is going to mimic a sculpin or a bait fish, any kind of rough fish that's out there, a small rainbow or brown trout, And for flies for winter, there's less available food source for trout in the wintertime. Spring is when all the bugs come out and when all the bugs are hatching. So there's more food, there's more biomass in the bottom of the river for trout. In the winter, it's kind of the opposite, if you look at anything in nature, the trees lose their leaves, the animals go into hibernation.
Everything goes dormant.
It's kind of the same with the river. So, but there is bugs that are still there. Gold stoneflies are available year-round to trout. Midges are available year-round for trout, and betas, all mayfly nymphs. And you usually see betas and midges hatching just about every day midday when the water warms up. So if you probably have a golden stone and some kind of midge or betas, you're probably going to catch fish, But you don't have to go just small. You don't have to fish 18, 20s, 22s. You can go bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. 16s, 14s.
That's right. You could go 14s, 16s. You could put a big old, rubber legs on there.
Like the skipper stone.
There you go.
And that is Matt's, for everybody that doesn't know, that's Gilligan's signature stonefly pattern that we sell here in the Reno Fly Shop. So come check that out as well.
Crushes them in the winter.
Yeah, absolutely. Weather patterns, we're still in low flow condition, but things have really cooled off, and people familiar with my fishing reports and my blog as well as social media. And I know that Gilligan and I talked all summer long, about this water temperature. All summer long, we encouraged people to bring their thermometers to the rivers. It's not time to leave them out of your vest or leave them out of your packs now, because it's still very telling, the temperatures.
That's right.
What temperature ranges in the wintertime do you kind of have people target?
Well, right now, I haven't taken a water temperature recently.
About 48 is the last one I got about 48. A week ago.
That's still pretty good. Up in Hurstdale on the California side of the river, a few years ago, I took a water temp every day in the winter. It actually averaged out to be about 39.5 degrees every day. Okay, sometimes it was 38, sometimes it was 41, but usually when I put my thermometer in there, it was 39.5 degrees. On the Nevada side, it was pretty stable too. It was usually a couple degrees warmer.
As I would be expected.
Yeah.
It's lower elevation.
You got to think when the water's temperature is that low, their metabolism has slowed down. And we have to go back to where I talked about you have to target the slower, usually deeper water, because that water is warmer. Those fish might be active maybe at only a certain time of the day. So you don't need to get out there at 6 a.m. When it's, especially up by my house, it's like 5 degrees. And funny, so I'll be drinking my coffee and sometimes I'll look out the window and there's people that roll up and you see them park across the bridge and they kind of look around, and they get back in their car and they drive off because it's just too cold, And then I'll go, well,
very unmotivating.
If they rolled out there at like 12 o'clock, it's going to be a lot different, So water temperature in the winter, it's going to be cold. You can still catch fish in cold water. You're just maybe going to have to change the times of day that you fish. You probably want to fish more into the afternoon hours when the water warms up. Now, that being said, this is all usually, is this what I'm saying? That's the key word, because you never know. You could go out there at 6 a.m. and swing a streamer through something and they might grab it, So there's no there's no certainties in fly fishing. What I'm telling you guys right now, what I'm saying, you should probably just do the exact opposite.
I think that, you do bring a lot, and I think a lot of people they're going to really be interested in hearing your perspective. We've all got to know you on your blog. It's been just a great source of resource for us.
Well, thank you.
Everybody, if you haven't checked it out, you really should. We'll have links on the show notes, but most people probably listening to this podcast, most people already have it in their favorites, quite honestly.
Right on.
I know the east of town is really great fishing in the winter. And one of the things that we look for, at least I look for, is cloud cover for the blue-winged olive hatch. Is there any certain weather pattern, wind, no wind, that kind of gets you excited about, the fishing might be really good?
Usually cloud cover is good. As long as it's not too cold, sometimes you get cloud cover and the sun just doesn't warm the water up, Now, it's great to have cloud cover in, say, mid-February through March and April down on that east side. And that's when those blue-winged olives really, really pop, And for people that don't know, blue-winged olives really like inclement weather. They like cloudy, overcast days. And most bugs do. You used to get a day on the LT. If you go up to the LT, Little Truckee in the summer, and it's cloudy, bam.
Yeah, it's
going to bust out.
Yeah, it's full. It's full on.
But actually, in the wintertime, I'm actually looking, like this month and next month, I'm actually looking for sunny days. Yeah, I want high pressure. It's kind of the opposite of the summertime. I want a week of high pressure. Then I know the fishing's going to be good because the water is going to be warming every day. And that's what I want. I like high pressure in the winter. I like low pressure in the summer for fly fishing. On Pyramid Lake, it's a little different than the river. So it's kind of the opposite, But the best days we've had on the river east of town here has been on some kind of high pressure day, actually.
Interesting. And I've, you've heard somewhat, kind of anecdotally, people will say, well, boy, we don't really like it as a low front's approaching. Transition days. Have you seen those transition days affect fishing?
Yeah, absolutely. And usually that's because the barometer's changing. When you have low pressure come in, the barometer's changing, it's dropping. Sometimes that puts fish off the grab. When it's rising on the river, it seems like when high pressure sets in after the storm leaves, the fishing's usually good. Or right during that storm, when the pressure drops and it stabilizes, it seems like the bite's pretty good. It's just those changes in the pressure. I don't know what it does to trout. It seems like they don't like pressure change and they don't like changes in flows.
Yeah. Well, the flow just makes them move, and then we have to readjust our approach. But my understanding is the pressure changes has something to do, or at least it can have something to do with their swim bladders and their ability to regulate that. Pyramid Lake is one of the great things we have here.
World-class fishery. Yeah.
And you spend a lot of time guiding and teaching out there. Tell us about some of your experiences in the wintertime out of Pyramid.
Well, that's the thing. We're just talking about the river. You kind of want high pressure sometimes in the winter because it warms the water up. But Pyramid, it's kind of the opposite. You want low pressure.
Absolutely. All the time.
All the time. You want some wind, hopefully you have some wind, some cloud cover, and some chop on the water. In the wintertime at Pyramid, the water's still relatively warm right now, but it's gonna get cold. And so when the water gets cold at Pyramid, you're going to the best grab is probably going to be in the afternoon, before it gets dark. And that's how it was last year. The best grab was from about 3 to 5 when that shoal kind of warms up and those fish come in and start cruising that first shelf, and
absolutely.
And that seems like it's always, kind of 3 to 5-ish, and even on those days where it's really sunny, say you haven't caught a fish all day, and then bam, all of a sudden that sun kind of gets lower, goes behind the ridge right there, and then boom, they start coming in.
And we're seeing water temps now, surface water temps have now pretty consistently all around the lake dipped below 60 degrees.
Oh yeah, it's in the 50s.
It is, yeah. And so as we approach, the mid 50s, even to the low 50s, getting ready to go into the high 40s, it's when that bite really goes off.
Yeah, that's right. And they're going to come out of that deeper water, and start cruising the shelves.
A few of us got to attend a happy hour that we hosted here in the shop with Gilligan in October, kind of getting ready for the season, right after it had started, I believe. But one of the things we talked about was switch rods. We talked, you like to cast those on the river with streamers in the wintertime. But I know that you're a real big switch rod advocate at Pyramid.
Yeah.
Tell everybody a little about that.
Well, that East Coast guys have been striper fishing them in all those beaches out there. Most of them are using switch rods because they can get out farther. And you're going to do a two-handed overhand cast.
There you go. Because it's not necessarily the traditional spey cast or a single-hand overhand cast.
I'm not spey casting. You can do it, and you could use a spey type of line. But I'm going to two-handed overhand cast, and I'm not going to use a spey line.
You're going to use a single-hand line.
I'm going to use
and then upline it.
That's right. If you're going to use a floating line, you're going to want to upload it probably 3 line sizes. So if you have a 6-weight switch rod, you're probably going to want to use a 9-weight floating weight forward fly line on it. For your shooting head system, I use the Rio outbound shorts, and I usually just upload them one. They're already uplined.
Yeah, one
in
full,
the full
weight.
size.
Yeah.
But usually I upload another, so if I have a 6-weight switch rod, I usually use about a 330 grain. And most, people already have that line.
Absolutely. No,
so
absolutely.
if you had a switch rod, you could just, put it on your switch rod and cast it. And we're not going to spay cast. We're going to 2-handed overhand cast. And the problem is with the spay lines is that you usually have the line, and you usually have a loop to your head. Well, first of all, you have a loop from your running line to your,
to your spay line.
To your spay line.
Right.
And then you got to put another head on top of that, sinking, floating, whatever.
Unless it's integrated. Like the switch
integrated.
chucker, the Rio switch chucker.
Yeah, the Rio switch chucker would probably work out there.
Totally.
But you're still going to go through some kind of loop
connection
on there, and that thing's going to get hung up in your rod guide constantly, and at Pyramid, you're retrieving your flies all the way up to your tip top of your rod every single time, because a lot of times you get a grab, right when you're lifting it out of the water.
Right at your feet.
Yeah, so you see the guys out there trying to spay cast with their spay lines, and they're just having a miserable time because just getting caught up in the rod guides all the time, So the Rio outbound shorts on a switch rod is great because you're going to 2-hand overhand cast. You're going to have less fatigue at the end of the day, if it's windy, if you're casting with 2 hands compared to 1.
So when you were saying, floating line, upline at 3 weights with the shooting head, the sinking line, 2 line weights, or 1 if you're using the outbound short because it's already uplined 1. Do you have a preference when the water does get cold, like in that, because now we're going to enter late November now and through January. That's usually the coldest month before the fish really start to spawn, kind of thinking about their spawn in late February. Do you have a preference? Or do you have a certain condition that dictates whether you're going to nymph or drag streamers still, like we have all early season?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. For me personally, when I go out and fish the lake, I want to try to get a grab. I want to feel the grab. So I would either be using a shooting line or I'll use a floating line with, 2 heavy nymphs on it and a longer leader.
Do you like the nymph indicator lines that have the bit heavier head for the flotation?
I think for some people that need that, maybe that are having a hard time roll casting or something, a heavy rig, that's a great line. On all my, on all the guide rigs, and all the stuff people use, all the equipment that I have, it's just a regular, they're all 8 weights with a regular 8-weight floating fly line on it.
Yeah. I was just wondering if you really kind of encourage your clients and your guests to go into, switch rods specifically, or do you kind of give that opportunity for?
I kind of fill them out. It's a little awkward trying to cast a switch rod 2-handed, overhand casting.
Yeah, I mean it's certainly a learning curve.
It's definitely a learning curve. So some people that have, the thing is, switch rods are so popular now that a lot of, you'd be surprised how many people have used them and have swung flies on them, with them. They've gone to the Trinity or the Klamath or something with their, so they already have a feel for it,
Sure.
Those people I can definitely, they're going to pick it up quick. It's the people that have never used a switch rod and then they try to 2-handed overhand cast, they're going to have a problem with it. So they're better off with the single hand rod at first,
We did a fair amount of teaching here in the shop this last fall with people getting ready for steelhead season. I was really quite surprised how many people have interest and some limited experience, enough experience to have a desire to develop more experience by learning a little bit more about the spay casting.
Yeah, well, go up to the Trinity.
Oh yeah,
right now there's one stretch in one day.
To jump back to the river a little bit, and we can blend this with the Pyramid Guide experience. How do you prepare your clients coming to the river for the first time? What's unique about the Truckee and what's unique about Pyramid Lake? Do you communicate to them so they're best prepared for it?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm an independent guide, so I have a chance to communicate with people when they, first of all, they usually send me an email. I'll email them back, and then we try to talk on the phone. So when we have that conversation on the phone, I want to see exactly what their expectations are, if they want to learn a lot or if they just want to go out and stick some fish, So there's kind of 2 different scenarios there. But the main thing, like on the Truckee River, is I want to ask them, if they're physically fit. Can you go out and wade fish the Truckee River for 8 hours in a day? And most people can't. That it's a very tough river to get around on all day long. So I want people to be honest with me when they call me and tell me, if you got a bum left knee, a wade trip on the Truckee River is probably not your best option. We're probably going to go a little Truckee, or we got to get in the boat,
Yeah. Just real quick, you do offer that as a service, especially in the east of town. And do you do it up in the canyon?
Yeah, I do.
You do have your raft or your new inflatable drift boat. Yeah,
I got an NRS inflatable drift boat. It's great to fish out of. And there's a couple floats I can do up in California, and obviously the Nevada side here, pretty easy float. The California sides, there's some white water and it's pretty fast going. So you almost have to have some people that have a little bit of experience and maybe have fished off a drift boat before, because they're going to miss most spots as you drift down. Especially if you're nymphing. If you're streamer fishing, it's generally okay. But
yeah, it's a little different approach.
It's a little different approach.
How would you divide up? How would you estimate you could divide up your clients on the experienced angler or the person that's coming out to maybe the first time experience to learn a little bit about fly fishing, and they say to you, Gilligan, I'd like to really focus on learning.
A lot of first time fly anglers, men and women, and I actually, that's great. When you get a first timer, there's no expectations. If you get a person that has been all over the country and has fished the Bighorn and the Green and the Missouri, they have different expectations, obviously, than that first timer. I'm up for that challenge. Don't get me wrong. When somebody's fished all over the country and they have some experience, I'm up for that challenge. And I'm going to show them the Truckee River. And usually they catch a fish of their lifetime. They catch a fish bigger on the Truckee River than they have anywhere in the country.
And it's so surprising to so many people that come here, especially when they come with those preconceptions.
That's right.
I fished other places. Oh, yeah. I've caught big fish. And they come back and go, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it blows them away.
Absolutely.
Sometimes. But it's very tough too. And they have to pay attention and they have to listen to what I have to say, because I have to teach them. I have to fish through them, right? They have to learn how I like to fish the river, and I have to teach them what I know. So they kind of have to abandon what they've learned before, and technically they're going to have to be pretty good at the end of the day to catch one of those fish, you can throw a bobber on the Bighorn and catch 30 fish from ramp to ramp, right? It doesn't take a whole lot of talent. I've been there. I've done that. I actually never fished the bobber, but I've dry fly fished, caught a ton of fish on dry flies.
Hopper dropper and all that stuff.
Whatever,
absolutely,
yeah.
Sure.
But here it's a lot different. And if you're going to come out and catch those big fish like you see on my website, you're going to have some kind of technical abilities. And I can teach you that in a day, that, we're going to have to get through that learning curve, and you're probably going to hook a big fish and lose them, right? Because fast water, you hook a big fish in fast water, most people lose them. They get broken off, or they don't chase the fish down and go to the fish, right? They try to bring them up through the current. So we got to learn all that. Not only do you have to get the right drift, the right technique down, but you got to learn how to land those big fish too.
Yeah, absolutely. And and this is why it's really important. And these questions somewhat are a bit leading, because I really like to take the opportunity in this podcast to communicate to people that are thinking about their first guide trip, because guide trips can be so important as an ability to learn the techniques that we've all, through trial and error, we can really shorten that learning curve through the services that we provide as guides. And, there's just about no one better than you, Gilligan, on putting fish to net. Just go to the website and you guys can see all of the pictures that Matt's put up over the years that, his tactics and techniques have proven to work on the Truckee, and big fish exist here. We don't, we might not have the thousands of fish per mile they have in Craig on the Missouri.
Right.
But we have some very large fish that.
Yeah. And I think it also, there are certain rigs we use that catch more fish than others. Like if you hire a guide and he he loops on your tapered leader and he throws the thingamabobber up there, that's a disservice to you. He should have some kind of rig besides just the standard tapered leader and the thingamabobber. He should be showing you how to right angle nymph, maybe how to drop shot, how to tight line nymph. You're going to have some outside the box techniques in there, to catch those fish.
And Gilligan just threw out a bunch of terms. I'd like to have another happy hour. And, I'd like to have Matt down, and we had such a great response at the first one with Pyramid Lake tactics. I'd like to do one with the Truckee River tactics and talk about some of the drop shot nymphing, right angle nymphing, and some of these terms that aren't necessarily on everybody else's radar.
Right. And there's so much. I'm always thinking of this stuff, like I'm always trying to evolve and have a better rig than the next guy. There's certain rods that I use for the Truckee River. I'm always using a 10-foot rod. If you're indicator name, it's going to help you mend the line. If you're dry fly fishing, it's going to help in the line. If you're tight line fishing, it's going to help you reach out further. So I think that's important. I'm going to use a 10-foot rod, and most of the rods that I use are either a 10-foot 4 weights or 5 weights on the Truckee River, even for my streamer fishing personally. And when I streamer fish, I do a lot of jigging, and very long leaders, so like 20-foot leaders.
On the Truckee.
Oh
my gosh.
And so this is stuff that not a lot of people are doing, a lot of people are putting on some kind of sink tip and fishing them like that. But we have a lot of pocket water. There's so much stuff I have in my mind all the time, and I try to figure this stuff out. And, I spend well over a couple hundred days a year on the Truckee River. I mean, I don't really go anywhere else to fish because I feel like I got to spend my time on the Truckee River. I mean, when somebody calls me up, I'm going to give them the best service I can. They're spending a lot of money to come on a guide trip. I mean, Absolutely. It's not cheap, and especially if you're a working guy, I'm going to give that person they're going to learn the most, and I want them to have a good time. And I feel like if I'm out there on the river every day, I can give them a good experience because I know I know the best section of fish, and I know where those fish are at.
As guides, we're sensitive to people that don't get to hire guides every time they go out to a new piece of water. Right. And there might be an opportunity for someone to partner up with a buddy and come up here and fish the Truckee River for the first time or, the 10th time, but they're frustrated after not finding the fish that always appear on our blogs and pictures. And we're sensitive to that. We know that this is your one shot, and we're going to work really hard to have that experience both be rewarding in the sense of learning new tactics and techniques, but also do whatever we can to put you in a position to catch fish. And I think it's completely exemplified by Matt's blog and the pictures that he shows with clients, having those.
Yeah, your guide wants you to catch fish more than you want to catch fish.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just how it is.
Yeah, and it's our success is their success.
Absolutely.
What is a typical guide day like? And does it change throughout the year? And the winter months is over the
Sure.
How many hours can people expect to go out on the water?
In the winter or in the summer?
Both. Well, both. Because
in the summer you can get a full day in really easy because you can start early. And in the winter sometimes it's hard to get a full day in because you kind of want to start later in the morning. And it gets dark earlier. Yeah,
and a full day would be what? I mean,
well, we're talking 8 hours.
8 hours on the
8
water.
hours of fishing. Some people don't make it that long. If you're wade fishing for 8 hours, it's
rough.
It's rough. It's a kind of a workout. You know, if we're in the drift boat, then they're usually actually more than 8 hours. Because you put the boat in, you got to do your own shuttle, take the boat out. But I'll do whatever people want. I mean, there's no set schedule. Yeah. So if somebody...
But just for people to prepare, just to kind of wrap their head around as they start getting plans for the spring and maybe hopefully come up here in the wintertime and have this great opportunity between storms this year.
I do a lot of half-day trips and, people like to do half-days, and that's usually 4 hours of fishing for people is plenty, Sometimes, if I see that they booked a half-day, I'll go do a full day, or sometimes we do 6 hours of fishing in a day. I mean, kind of depends what the weather's doing. Sometimes the wind picks up real bad in the afternoons, or, in the winter it might start snowing or raining, or you might get cold. People's feet might be cold, so.
How about a pyramid? What's a guide day like that out there because that's a bit of a commitment to get out there.
It is. And I try to do full day trips out there at Pyramid. If sometimes I'll do some half day trips. And if I do a half-day trip, it's usually always in the afternoon because I want to get the evening grab. So if you go out to Pyramid, like if we went out to Pyramid today on a full-day trip, your first 6 hours, it might just be all casting practice. And that's kind of the bummer about it, right? I mean, you go out there on a day when there's high pressure and it's sunny, those fish are probably not going to come in. Hopefully when you have a guide trip out there, it coincides with some type of storm that comes through, and maybe this winter will be different than the last winters where we've had high pressure dominating the entire state of California, in Western Nevada. I mean, this year could be a great year at the lake simply because there's going to be more storms coming through and more low pressure systems, you know. We're going to see the river get big this winter, I'm sure. And there's a lot of people, you know, I know a lot of people have only been fly fishing for a few years and they've never seen the river, how it can be. You know, they just think of the Truckee River as this little creek that they see now. You know, they have no idea how big potentially it can get and how long it can stay up for. I mean, if we get a lot of snow, we're talking, you know, May and June and sometimes part of July, the river can be high and pretty muddy, you know,
absolutely.
On a typical year. But then when it comes down, it's off the charts fishing. You know?
Oh yeah, it's
unbelievable.
It can be, and the river needs it just biologically. Just needs a good flushing, just to.
That's right. Flood sometimes is the best thing for a river.
Just reset things, just biologically, get some sediment to move around, freshen up the gravel bars that are existing, and not to mention redistribute fish through the system in a high water event. They'll just move around
and I imagine that some of those fish from California will get flushed down in through Nevada and. You know, when we get done with this today, I'm going to go fish the river here east of town. I haven't fished it since last May. I'm going to fish it just to kind of see, you know,
a little exploratory thing.
Yeah, if there's where the fish are at and kind of what's happening, you know. And I haven't fished it since May. You know, I've carp fished it in the summertime, but haven't trout fished it in a long time actually. You know, so it's kind of exciting, I guess.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's something that as I hope it comes across, and I know it does when you hear Matt talk about it. That Gilligan loves this river.
Yeah.
And it's not only his business and his way of life, but, you know, he doesn't do it necessarily for all the money and glory, but it's something.
And, you know, the thing is, I've been all over Montana. I know I fished all the rivers in Montana over the years, and I've never caught a fish in Montana as big as I have on the Truckee River. You know, usually I go out there. I have a buddy that lives in Bozeman. I grew up with him, and I'll go out there for a week in the fall, and we fish wherever we go, the Missouri or the Madison or wherever, Yellowstone, you know. And when I get done with that trip, I come back home to Truckee and I'll go fish right afterwards, you know, and boom, right when I come back, I catch a fish here on the Truckee River that was bigger than anything that I've caught on my trip to Montana. And the big fish, those big fish, and the big fish at Pyramid, you know, like Doug says when he tells people when he honor clinics, you know, when you hook one of these fish, you got to break their neck, and it kind of, you know, freaks people out, break their neck. Well, you got to fight that fish as hard as you can, you know, like, first of all, you got to set up on that fish very, very hard, right? Big fish have very hard jaws, and you got to set that hook. That hook's got to get in that mouth. You got to penetrate that jaw, and then the battle's on. You know, you got to break their neck. Game on. You cannot let that fish fight you. You got to fight that fish, you know, and that's the important part, you know. When I catch a big fish, I actually can get that fish in 15, 20, 30 seconds, you know, because I'm busting them up, you know, and most people don't do that. You know, they think because they got a fish on, they got to let the fish get tired. Well, it's just the opposite. You know, you got to put all your effort into getting that fish in as quickly as possible.
Well, it eliminates your chances of losing the fish.
That's right.
But as often, many of us will practice catch and release. The fish will be in much better shape.
Well, yeah, way much better shape.
That you'll have the chance to release it and reviving it.
And, you know, a lot of times when we've gotten these big fish on the river, and you see them on my website, some of these people are very inexperienced anglers. And the reason they've gotten those big fish is because they set up on them so hard they thought they were snagged, you know, and they kept setting the hook, right? Boom, boom, boom.
Just
and
then
they maybe set the hook like 4 times on this fish. And then all of a sudden that thing starts moving. And boom, well, they have a good chance of catching that fish because that hook is in their mouth now, you know, it's set in their jaw. Now I can coach them through the battle part of it, right? And we're going to keep that tip up, right? Blah, 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 you know, and get that fish in, you know.
Yeah. And then catch it, take that hero shot,
get
release
the hero
it.
shot, let them go.
Yeah. And do it again another day, hopefully.
Another day. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. How big at Pyramid? Do you think do you think we're going to push the 30-pound this year?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. Somebody will do it. You know, and it's probably going to be some dude that just rolls out there first time at Pyramid, you know.
Second cast,
bam, 30-pounder, you know. I think it'll be done. Yeah, I mean, it has the potential. I think we'll start seeing them up into 40 pounds one of these days.
No kidding.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll
get back to what they were.
If there's 25-pounders in there, there's a 30-pounder in there, and there's probably a 40-pounder in there. Yeah, and you know, people don't realize the world-class fishery we have right here. I mean, it's a half an hour from the shop.
Yeah.
half an hour.
And it's in our backyard, and it's just the awareness is growing.
Yeah.
We're still, it's going to happen. 30 pounds is going to, it's definitely, we're pushing
happen.
At that. Yeah. I think so too.
Yeah.
Matt, thanks a lot. This has been super great. We have a ton of information that we discussed. We're going to put more information in the show notes, the details that we discussed, going back for the flies, any dates that Gilligan has coming up with respect to clinics that he has, information from his blog at gilligansguideservice.com. His good friend Doug Willett at Calvada is also Pyramid Lake Guide Service. And then we will follow up. Hopefully, maybe we can find a date in December or January where we can have Matt come down to the shop and talk about some of these techniques. And tactics.
I mean, I can come and show you guys, 3 or 4 good nymphing rigs for the Truckee River, and how to set them up and tie the correct knots. Yeah, and that type of thing.
Everybody listening, I'm gonna hold Matt to that because I think I'll benefit from that as much as anybody else. So that'll be a really great thing. We'll put more information on our blog as well as the email that's going out. Matt, thanks again for doing this.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jim.
And here we go with the events calendar for the month of December as well as the fishing report. We're going to go slightly out of order this time just because the events calendar is so dense and we have so much coming up. Again, as always, as we discussed in the podcast with Gilligan, the show notes are available on our website at renoflyshop.com. Many times we will cover and present some of the details that we discussed. It's kind of hard to convey in an audio podcast. But I will impress upon all of you that if you ever have any questions for more detail, I do put contact information for both myself and the guest of each one of the podcasts. There is an email there, but you can always call the shop or stop by with more questions and to fill in some of the details of the things that we discussed. And here's the events calendar for December 2015. We have a bunch of things coming up this month, getting ready for the holidays and to keep you guys busy as the winter sets in. We have our holiday merchandise is going to be coming in throughout the month. We're going to have Sims, Sage, Adamsbuilt, Echo, and much, much more. Also available are gift certificates. These are good for in-store merchandise, lessons and clinics, and of course they can be applied for guide trips throughout the winter and as spring and summer gets going. As we discussed in episode 9 of the Reno Fly Shop podcast with Gilligan, and on December 11th at 6:30 here in the shop, we're going to have another happy hour with Gilligan. This will be a low-key event with a very social environment where you're going to be able to interact with everybody. Gilligan will be here to talk about leader constructions and much of the techniques and details that we discussed in the podcast, and you're going to be able to ask him first person exactly how to employ those Truckee River as well as Pyramid Lake. Also responding to many people's requests, kind of an intermediate advanced fly tying class. Jan Nemec from Mimic Fly Fishing is going to be in the shop 2 days in the month of December. He's going to be in December 9th and December 30th. From 6:30 to about 8:30. You're going to be able to learn to tie several of the streamers that he has created, both the hookup streamer and the scope and patterns for the Truckee River. The hookup is a pattern that's especially productive at Pyramid Lake and in the spring on the Truckee and the East Walker Rivers. It's an excellent pattern for a lot of different cold water and saltwater species. The cost for that class is $60. It includes materials. We suggest that this class will be open to intermediate and advanced tires and is only going to be limited to 4 tires, so we encourage you to get in and sign up early. Also building on the winter series is December 1st, 3rd, and 8th at 6:30 here in the shop. December 1st is Introduction to Fly Fishing. We're going to cover styles for moving in still water, the equipment that you use, knots and rigging, and we're going to actually go into leader construction for a Pyramid Lake leader. December 3rd, we're going to have basic fly tying. We're going to cover the tools and techniques and tying some of the most effective patterns that we all carry in our fly boxes. And finally, December 8th, we're actually going to do some fly casting in a local spot where we can get in out of the weather in a lighted environment and cover the basics of fly casting. These classes are $25 per class or $60 for all 3. And these are limited to 3 to 6 students. So again, please call the shop with any questions and details and sign up early. And here's the fishing report for November 25th, 2015. Pyramid Lake has been fishing hot one day and cold the next. Sometimes it can turn on and off in the same day over a period just of a couple hours. When it is good, it's been really good, and anglers have been catching good numbers and simply huge fish all over the lake. The afternoon bite seems to be the best, and as always, a stormy day with wind in your face seems to bring the fish to you. Where in previous reports we've suggested a stick and move technique if the fishing wasn't good, now we encourage you to find a beach with an accessible drop-off, some current, and wind in your face, and set up and keep at it until the fish come in. You can move around a bit, but if the first 3 things are met, the fish should cooperate pretty soon, and the afternoon bite, again, should be the best. Flies we suggest are the Weir Sculpin, the hookup and olive and chartreuse, the bellyache minnow, balanced leech in black, olive, white, and peacock, and of course the booby in chartreuse and black. The main Truckee River between Little Truckee Confluence and East Verdi. The water temps have cooled a bunch and will cool further as the current storms move in. The fish will be in a slower water and not moving around as much. This is the time of year of 1 or 2 fish day is a really good day, but those 1 or 2 fish will likely be just bruisers. Come prepared and hang on for the ride. High sticking can be some of the best technique to employ this time of year to catch these fish. Golden stones, as we discussed in the podcast, nymphs, dark betas, and don't go too small with those betas. You can actually go into a size 16, 14, sometimes 12s to attract their attention. Swinging streamers will also work and focus on the more traditional swinging water, which are tailouts and pool terminus, will be the best spots to catch some of these fish. Flies we suggest are the flashtail bugger in number 10 in black and olive, the carotene, number 14, skipper stone in number 8 and number 10, and the jig soft spot, number 16. We do wish everybody a really happy holiday and a great Thanksgiving. The storms are coming in and they're going to continue to come in now. Looks like the El Nino pattern is here to stay. So we hope everybody safe travels and a happy Thanksgiving. Thanks again, everybody, for listening to the Reno Fly Shop podcast. We hope to bring these out every 2 weeks as things are happening in and around the shop. We're really interested to find out what you think. Please give us your feedback. Give us a call, stop by, shoot us an email. You can always find out more information as podcasts drop at renoflyshop.com. Until then, have a great time and we'll talk to you soon. Enjoy.